Hello everyone, this is Rodrigo. Today I'll be talking about virtual violence and how it affects us and everyone around us. So just to start this off, I'll be talking about virtual violence and how it affects us within video games. There's also different versions of it, but you can just kind of apply that to everything realistically. So the first one is going to be talking about some people that were in favor of saying that violent video games and violent content in general can affect people. So in November 2nd, in 2005, there's a Supreme Court case in California that kind of started the whole movement of companies and businesses not allowing to sell M-rated content to minors, so anyone under the age of 18. At the time, the research that they had there was they were showing that video games and other violent content can affect people in different ways, such as them being more aggressive, and psychologically that they could think more aggressive thoughts and just kind of have less of a control of their emotions and behavior and whatnot. Nowadays, that's a little bit disproven for what it is, and it's kind of biased coming from me, from a person who plays video games all the time. So I'm kind of more in favor of saying that it's not true, but there is some kind of link between the two, and it's just kind of shows that even though we kind of absorb all of this normal violent content, that it still can affect us later on within our youth. Alright, next will be the people against saying that violent media affects us and who we are. Alright, so the first statement is that many of us who play video games, and some other people as well who kind of don't coincide with the kind of operation of how video games are run, but we say that we're just watching content or we're just playing a video game, and it's just fantasy, and it's not true that it is violent or anything like that. What it is there's this study that went on, and they showed that people who play more video games, who play more violent video games, tend to show more emotion, and they kind of learn how to feel empathy a little bit more in a different way that people would learn it. So, when you're younger, you could possibly learn empathy as a young child, and sometimes kids aren't really exposed to that. And so they can learn it in a different form, whether it's visually from movies or some kind of YouTube video or whatever. But video games also provide that because it's a little bit easier because you're more immersed within the content and whatnot. But the way I look at it is it's kind of more of a situational thing, and how we can show more guiltiness and empathy towards other things, depending on what kind of games you're playing and whatnot. If you're kind of playing like a hunter-esque game where you're hunting down animals, you can kind of feel more empathy towards the animal and whatnot, and kind of tell yourself in reality you're like, I don't want to do that kind of thing, and it kind of just stops you from going past the line of what is brutal and what is cruel and evil, and kind of just keep yourself in check that way. Alrighty then. Conclusion. So my conclusion of this whole thing is virtual violence does exist. There's no stopping that. It's everywhere in between video games, movie, even on social media like Instagram or Snapchat. There's always going to be, some people recording the fight, or some person gets hit by a car or something like that, And there's kind of just no getting away from that kind of thing. But it slowly just kind of twists our brains into just making us more desensitized to this normal content that ends up being kind of a normal thing to us. I mean, we can look at it as like a school shooting, for instance, not to get too sensitive, but we've had several shootings by now, and unfortunately, it's kind of gotten to the point where we say, well, this is kind of just a normal thing, right? And obviously, it's not. It's not okay. But what I kind of like really think that it comes down to is kind of like on a parental level of things. You don't want to. It's kind of a parent's point of view of knowing their children well and allowing them to absorb this kind of content within little increments, right? If your kid has some kind of mental illness or something like that, you don't want to let them be exposed to this content, because that drastically changes the way that they feel and act as a person. For kids who are kind of more grown up properly, in a way, over time they can be exposed to a little bit more and more about the reality of what's going on in the world and things like that. So that's my take on it, at least. For the quiz questions, the first one would be, in November 2nd, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments for and against the 2005 California law that prohibits the sale of M-rated video games. True or false? The next one is it possible for other people to learn emotion through virtual content? True or false? Alrighty then. Thank you for watching, everyone. See you later.